Can you hear me now? Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot of material to cover today, and I know that people will be coming in, but I know where they live, so I can get to them later. Good morning, and thank you so much for coming to our Loving Church Family Seminar. This is our fourth and final seminar on senior and end-of-life issues, and I believe we've saved the best for last. For those who don't know me, which I think most of you do, I'm Marcia Gaffin, and I'm a volunteer here at First Methodist Church. And for those of you who are watching online and on YouTube, we are located in Leavenworth, Kansas. And before I introduce our first speaker, I want to talk to you about something that I believe is of vital importance. And those of you who attended the seminar just basically a year ago might recall that at that time I was mourning the death of my dear friend Sally. And what made it especially hard for us is that Don and I actually discovered her body. And we then discovered she had been there for several days, and that subsequently we found out that there was no will, no directive on what to do. What do we do with her dogs? Who gets her stuff? Who do we notify? Didn't even know who to call. We had to track all that down. It was very distressing for me personally, as you can imagine. And guess what? It's happened again. Just this past week in our own church with one of our own family members here. I am pleading with you now. If you live alone, if you have no family that lives close by, or even if you just feel like we need to know, please, 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 I can't emphasize it enough, fill out one of these forms. It looks like this. It's on the table here. It is a form that will only be used by us. It'll go into a database that only 2 or 3 people have access to. We're not going to sell the information on the dark web. We're not going to, send out advertising. It is strictly for us if we get worried about you and we don't know who to call so that they can check on you. And if you so desire, as a bonus, we can create one of these cards for you, and you can carry this in your wallet, and then if you have an accident on the highway or if something happens and the police are involved, they know who to call. They can just find this card, and immediately they know what to do. So if you have any questions, it would just relieve us so much to know. We have so many people in our congregation that are living alone, and they are just, like maybe one accident away from a crisis. We need to have that information because we love you. I love you, and I cannot tell you how much peace it would bring to me to know that we would be able to reach the person that you want to know about this. So, having said that, I will be available during the break if you have any questions or if you have any concerns. Also, I just welcome you here, and let's get started. Our first speaker this morning is Bessie Tolbert. She's given up her Saturday morning to drive here from Topeka to talk to us about elder abuse. Bessie works in the criminal division of the Attorney General's office, our good Chris Colbert there. And let's give a warm welcome to Bessie Tolbert. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I am happy to be here. I probably should have thought about this before. I'm a walker. I like to move around. So we'll see. I may hold on to that. Beautiful. Love to see it. So today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I do work at the Office of the Attorney General, Chris Kobach. I did bring some things. Please take some time and take a look at the table. There are several things there for you. I've spent a lot of time working in adult protective services, and elder abuse is actually my background. And so now I have the opportunity to work on the law enforcement side to try and affect change, just working with law enforcement to bring some of these situations to light. And before I get started today, it's kind of a grim topic we're going to discuss. Nobody likes to think about the possibility that they may become a victim of elder abuse or that it could happen to them. We're going to talk about some of the statistics that go with that. But before we get started in that part of the conversation, what I would like to take a few minutes to do with you all is just hear from you about what your thoughts are about elder abuse, your familiarity with it, Sometimes people don't like to be considered elderly. That's a phrase that we use pretty regularly. I don't know very many people who care for the term. I usually go with older adults. But I would like to just take a few minutes and just you raise your hand if you have a comment. I'm happy to bring the microphone to you. But I think it's important to have some discussion before we get started with my presentation, a little bit about where we're at as our baseline, okay? Does that make sense for everybody? So, yes, I can do it. Ooh, is that better? See, I was worried about being too loud, but I can do it. So if we could, though, just kind of has everybody heard at least something, there's some familiarity with elder abuse? And if I were to say elder abuse, what would come to your minds first? What just pops into your head?
Physical neglect.
Physical neglect, safety. Okay, all right. Anyone else? Money? What money in what way? Okay, so taking money. All right. Anyone else? Yes.
You said ignoring.
Okay. Uh-huh.
I had a personal situation where my father was not being fed because he would say he was never hungry. Because he had dementia and he didn't feel hungry. So he didn't get fed.
Okay.
So
Kind of a neglect situation there.
they got fed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Anyone else?
I worked I'm a cook and I've worked in a lot of care homes.
Mm-hmm.
And been around a lot of elderly, I'm elderly now, but I've been around a lot of elderly people. And in the care homes, it's like, you see staff that it's gotta be more than about money. You gotta really care about people to really, do that kind of job. And when you see the abuse and the neglect, when you see the abuse and neglect that goes on in some of those places, it's really just heart-wrenching. And I just wondered, it's been quite a few years since I worked in care homes. I've just wondered, have they got a coalition now where they go around and check more and do more about just checking on people that's in care homes? Because back then it's been decades since I worked in one, but it was I've worked in probably about 5 of them. It was a lot of abuse in some of the ones that I worked in.
So we'll touch on that. Yeah. Yes.
As a non-family member, how do you intervene or broach the subject when you think there might be abuse or neglect, but the family tells you to mind your own business? What do you know? Stay out of our affairs. That kind of. But an outsider looking in, it doesn't look good.
Sure. Right. So we'll talk about that, kind of things that you can do if you've got concerns. So any other thoughts or comments? And I realize now that I didn't do a very good job of saying back what people were saying. I hope that you were able to hear the comments that people were making. So, yeah. Yes.
Meal on Wheels.
Okay. Meals on Wheels?
A great portion of Meals on Wheels. People that go around, most of the time, the big part of their job is to make sure who they give them food to is still alert and ready to. I had a neighbor that they came over to my house, said, "What's going on next door? We can't find her." I knew she was out of town.
Very good. Meals on Wheels. I've delivered Meals on Wheels many times in different towns, and they are a great set of eyes to make sure that folks are being seen at least once a day. So, yes.
We have a situation where a woman had a stroke and she was put in a nursing home, and her sons have a power of attorney, but they won't let anyone visit her.
Okay. All right. So that's just kind of a sampling of some of the things that we're going to touch on today. So, yes. Any other comments before we go ahead and get started?
If you talk to your children enough, if you don't call, they'll be worried.
Okay, if you don't talk to your children enough or don't call, they'll be worried. Worried enough to come and call or worried enough to come and see you? But they might ring you up. All right. Well, so the work that I do in the Attorney General's office is I'm in the Economic Crimes Unit, and I'm the A&E Program Consultant. So I'm the Abuse, Neglect, Exploitation Program Consultant. And our office, our unit, we prosecute those crimes if we work with counties to do that work. So I have some information. There's a little bit, as I said, over here. I do know that if you have a complaint, if you want to make a complaint, there's a QR code here at the bottom of this sign. Excuse me. If you scan it, it will take you directly to the complaint form that you can fill it out.
Okay, how do us dinosaurs do it?
Well, you can go online to the Attorney General website.
So there is no phone number.
Actually, there is a phone number. So it's right here at the bottom. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Just a little bit of a disclaimer. This is just for educational purposes and informational. Certainly, I'm not an attorney, and the information is as timely as we can make it. But if you have questions, you'll want to consult your own legal counsel. And I know that this looks like a lot of information that we're going to cover. I probably should have broken it up into a couple of slides, but we're going to get through all of it, don't worry. So I would also like to say that this is a pretty interactive presentation, so if you have any comments or questions, please just raise your hand while we're presenting, while I'm talking, and we'll take your questions as we go instead of holding them until the end, okay? So the first thing that we're going to talk about is who is an elder in Kansas. So states have different statutes. They kind of look at things depending on their state statute. In Kansas, an elder is a person that's 60 years or older. And we also have a dependent adult statute, which is somebody that's 18 years or older that has the inability, they're unable to protect their own interest. What I would like to emphasize with this slide is that age alone does not create vulnerability. Merely being, I say all the time, I don't think my husband would appreciate me telling him he's vulnerable just because he's over 60. I don't think that he would appreciate it. But I don't think that any of you would probably consider yourself vulnerable based on your age. Vulnerabilities can increase with age, and criminals do act on that. So they would be targeting the things that would potentially create vulnerabilities, and that is one of the things that we'll talk about. But are there other things that you think might make adults, older adults, more of a target for elder abuse?
Them not, people that's, like loners and don't have anybody around.
Maybe not having a big support system, being on their own quite a bit, kind of like Marcia was talking about just before the presentation started. Okay. Anything else? No? Yes. Okay.
So very hard to keep tabs on what's going on.
So hard to know what's happening because of the strain in the family relationship. Yeah, that's a good one too. It's out there quite a bit. Yes? Pride, yep. That is one of the things that we'll get to. It can be a hindrance. We're going to look a little bit, every year they do a profile of older Americans, and so we're just going to take a quick snapshot of some of the things that they discovered in the most recent one, which happened in 2023, that came out in 2024. So this is one that I think is pretty important. If I were to ask how many of you would like to be able to stay in your homes as long as possible, as safely as possible, just a show of hands, would that be unsurprising, right? Everybody kind of wants to stay with what they're familiar with. Unfortunately, a lot of homes aren't built to accommodate those increasing needs as we get older. So being able to stay in our homes as we age, it really means that you have to kind of be thinking about that so that you can stay safely in your home. The safe part is really important. And so as you're thinking about doing things, how am I going to be needing to be altering my home environment, my hard surfaces as I'm aging? And then this one, I don't think that people, does this statistic, fewer than 5% of people reside in nursing homes, does that surprise anyone? So I am often surprised by this statistic, but it really tends to fit by the show of hands that I just saw. Most people want to be able to stay in their homes. They will stay in their homes. Very few people go to nursing facilities unless they absolutely need to. And even as the age increases, for those folks that are 85 and older, it's still less than 10%. That's just not very many people in nursing facilities on the whole when we're talking about community-based living for older adults.
That's because they can't afford to do it.
That is a part of it, isn't it? How expensive it is. So here's Kansas. Here's looking at Kansas, what we've got going on. The population increased 27.8% over those 10 years for individuals 65 and older. And by 2030, all of the baby boomers will be over 65. And by 2050, they'll be over 80. So we are moving towards an aging landscape here in Kansas. And this just kind of gives you an idea. 2015 wasn't that long ago. You can see here, these red counties are the ones with 30% or more in 2015. And that's what Kansas is going to look like now, because this is 2025. So when we talk about an aging landscape across the state, it's especially as we kind of look at the western part of the state. Obviously, Leavenworth and Atchison are here. You guys are in that 15 to 19%, so you do have a little bit lower, but certainly the more rural counties have a significant increase in older adults. Okay. So these are still kind of just big picture statistics that we're talking about. We're not talking about individuals and kind of getting down a couple of levels. So on this slide, what I really kind of want you to pay attention to is this part. The victim knows the person that's taken the money from them. They're not unknown to them. Over half, almost 3/4 of those individuals who were victims knew the person. And then that 28% being stranger perpetrated. Does this one surprise you? Because you hear a lot about scams and things that are happening, so yeah. Oh, yeah, the National Center on Elder Abuse. So this one is surprising to me because I think that scams are in front of us so much that we tend to think that it's people that are far away from us that are taking our money, and that is absolutely true, but far more people know the person that has taken that money from them. And another resource is the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center. You can go there, find out information, but the $3.4 billion in 2023, up from 2022, and the average loss per case was nearly $34,000. These aren't necessarily small amounts we're talking about. And I saw an interesting statistic on individuals who are scams. Younger adults are also victims of scams. It's number 1 for younger adults. It's number 4 for older adults. The primary difference is that younger adults are taken for about $1,000. Older adults, while it's number 4, it can be between 7 and 9. So once again, the amounts matter. Now this one's a tough one. So what does that mean? People in this room know someone or who have had an experience with elder abuse. That's a tough statistic, and it's difficult to share, but it's also why this is such an important topic. To your point, sir, about knowing that something's going on but not knowing quite what to do about it, it's happening. people are living in their homes longer. So that is going to be something that we're running into. Please.
If you know something like that, I've always wondered what happens to you. I mean, do those people find out if you report it?
Do what people find out?
People that are actually being abused. If you call this in and you report it,
Oh, so her question is, if you call in a report of somebody being abused, will they find out? That generally, if you're calling Adult Protective Services, which we'll talk about later, that information is not shared. So it's anonymized.
well, a lot of times it's family, and it can really, I mean, it needs to happen, but yet you don't want to split the relationship you have with that person.
Yep, and we will talk about that. So this is kind of another big statistic. They're kind of hard-hitting statistics, and I don't love that for us, but it is just where we are. 1 in 14 cases is reported. So we know it's underreported. 1 in 44 cases of financial abuse is reported. 3 times more likely to be hospitalized or prematurely die than seniors that are not abused. Yes? They've actually done some studies. New York did an incident study several years ago to kind of get a feel for that. They've been doing some very targeted research on what that actually starts to look like. So, and they also look at the numbers of reports that we do receive. We receive all of the reports that are screened in. They get sent from social service agencies to our agency, and we had over 7,000 reports last year. So that is across the agencies that receive reports. So they've been doing some really good research to kind of find these things out, some geriatricians and other folks who are committed to finding out ways to work on prevention. They're doing that research. Yep.
If you're a physician or in the medical field, is it like child abuse you are responsible for reporting it?
A mandated reporter, yep, we do have mandated reporter statutes. So everybody is like jumping ahead. That's okay. That's okay. You've got your questions when you've got them. Ask the questions. Hopefully we'll cover them in some future slides. I do want to talk about this one, though, for a minute. Generally, what happens is individuals are victims, and that just kind of creates a downward spiral. And then it sort of snowballs, and their health declines. That's how they end up in those situations. So, what is elder abuse? All the states kind of have their own definitions. In Kansas, this is what that looks like. I don't really like to read slides, so I'm hoping that you all, I can read them to you if you'd like, but if you need me to, but I'll give you a minute to take a look at them. So there are 2 types of statutes here. We have the statutes that the social service agencies, when they're doing investigations, that they use, and then there are law enforcement statutes. And the law enforcement statute is a little different because it's a criminal statute. They look at the mistreatment of a dependent adult or an elder, and they have language around that. The ways that individuals can be taken advantage of: undue influence, coercion, harassment, duress, deception, false representation, false pretense, or without adequate consideration. Undue influence, duress, deception. Undue influence is when you have somebody who is unduly influencing you. Maybe it's a grandchild, maybe it's a child, maybe it's a dear friend, but they are using their relationship with you to create a situation where you don't feel like you could tell them no. And so one of the things that I would like you to take away today from this presentation is that elder abuse is relational. Relationships, whether manufactured or real, are one of the vehicles that are used to commit elder abuse in all of its different forms. And here's the rest of that part of the statute. There are powers of attorney statute. There's a uniform trust code. There's a violation for the act of obtaining a guardian or conservator, and they're felony crimes. They're felony person crimes. So that makes the difference between jail and prison. They're anything over $1,500 is a person felony on the financial part of it. Then there's the physical side of it, unreasonable confinement, unreasonable punishment. So those might be instances you might hear where somebody can't get out of their house, they're not being allowed to go places, maybe they're just being kind of kept away from everybody. And finally, to omit or deprive an elder, so that's going to be potentially a neglect situation, physically injure, confine, unreasonable punishment. Those are things that fall under that as well. Now, hopefully this will work. And it's a 2-minute video. It's Mickey Rooney giving his testimony about his experience with elder abuse before the Senate. And so hopefully, oh, look at that, it popped up. Yes, I was so excited to play it. And then my supervisor was like, I don't know if it's going to work. I'm like, I hope. So here we go, hopefully. And hopefully we'll be all able to hear it. Come on. We can do it. Well, I can get it a different way, but that's what I'm hoping. Maybe double click? Oh, yeah. Oh, come on now, don't be that way. All right, there we go. Thank you.
I was unable to.
All right, I will be. All right. And hopefully this will be loud enough because we can't make it any bigger. I could.
I was unable to avoid becoming a victim of elder abuse. Elder abuse comes in many different forms: physical abuse, emotional abuse, and financial abuse. When it happens, you feel scared, disappointed, yes, and angry. And you can't believe that it's happening to you. You feel overwhelmed. When I asked for information, I was told that I couldn't have any information of my own. What the hell were you talking about? I was told it was none of my business. And that it's none of my business, and when you're told that, you're left to leave powerless. For years, I suffered silently. I didn't want to tell anybody. I couldn't muster the courage. And you have to have courage to, I need help. And I knew I needed it. Even when I tried to speak up, I was told to shut up and be quiet. You don't know what you're talking about. It seemed that no one wanted to believe me. And if it can happen to me, oh, God willing it, and unwilling it, it can happen to anyone. I know who I'm talking about. And I'm not speaking just for myself, of what I hope to be, of what I was taken from me. I'm asking you to stop this of elderly abuse. I mean to stop it.
So that happened. He passed away. It's been some years ago, but he was one of the people that gave testimony to Congress when they were looking at passing the Elder Justice Act, which has since passed.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. My bad. So that testimony is from probably about 14 years ago, but he was in front of Congress talking about elder abuse and what his experience was with it. And I think that that is pretty on par with the stories that we hear, that I heard when I was doing the work. And so the things that resonate with me is it takes courage to come forward. You're afraid. You don't think anyone's going to listen to you. He didn't feel like anyone was listening to him. And that experience, it really does impact people's willingness to share their story. So he talked about some of the things. There are several different ways that elder abuse can happen, and they often happen at the same time. It is unusual for a person to just be neglected or abused or psychologically abused. They usually kind of are rolled up into a big old ball of fishhooks, and it's a combination of things that are used to maintain that power and control over that individual. And this is another hard slide, but it is who commits elder abuse, and it really is kind of all in the family. And there are individuals who are caretakers at nursing facilities, other types of caretakers that are also in that pie, but other family, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, other people that are known to that person, maybe stepchildren. There are a lot of nuances to what these things can look like. It might be a daughter and a son-in-law. It might be a son and a daughter-in-law and a grandchild. It can be a lot of different things that we're looking at. Keep an eye on my time. But there are also other people, new friends, new people, new romances, new friends that come into the picture, or they may be strangers. So it's a gamut. It's not just one thing. It can be a lot of things. And sometimes new friends bring other new friends, and that's not always as cool as it could be. The other thing that they've discovered with a lot of the research that they've done is that the individuals who are the perpetrators, they may have a substance abuse issue, they may have a mental health issue, they may have a combination of substance abuse and mental health issues, and they probably are somewhat dependent on the adult for money, for housing, for other types of things that they need because they're not working, maybe they can't work, so they are in that person's life. Any questions so far as we've been going along?
The Kansas Power of Attorney Act, do you know basically what this is?
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry. So, does the first one surprise you a little bit? The greed and power and control? One of the things that they've done, particularly the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life in Minnesota, they have worked with older adults of victims of abuse in later life for a long time. And one of the things that they came to understand was that while there are a lot of different elements in elder abuse and abuse of dependent adults, there are some things that are similar to domestic violence. So it's a domestic violence in later life situation. Greed and power and control is at the base of it, right? Greed for the money, for the house, control over that person's movements and what they're doing, not allowing them to do the things that they want to do, having that control. At the societal level, ageism and stereotypes about older adults really kind of enable elder abuse to not be seen with the visibility that it should have. Based on 10,000 people a day turning 65, you would think that maybe there was a little more visibility in the world about it, but there isn't. And those are some of the reasons why. Criminals have thoughts about older adults, that they may be easier to confuse, that they may be more trusting. Some of these things may be true, but not all of them. I will say, these two things, check out. These are reasons why people don't report. They really are concerned about losing their independence. If you think about how many people raised their hand when I said, how many of you would like to stay in your own home? If you feel as though that's going to be put in jeopardy because you admit something's happening that was beyond your control because someone else was being a bad actor, but if you think that that might cause you to lose that level of independence that we all enjoy, that's going to be a barrier to reporting that something's going on. Whoop. Family members, back to that power and control, and family members, we're going to inherit that money anyway. I've been helping Mom with this. I should probably be getting paid for it. She's not giving me anything. I'm going to get it anyway. I can't pay my cell phone bill this month. I can't make my car payment this month. My mortgage is behind a couple of months. They're not really doing anything with that money. So, are they really going to miss it? Those are all things that people think about other people's money, about our money, right? Did everybody work hard for the money that they've got? Right? I work hard every day for the money that I've got. My husband works hard for the money that he's got. This angers me. This mindset and this mentality, it angers me because they are taking something that you all worked very hard for without regard to the possibility that you may need it for something, like your own care, your own bills, your own car payment, if you have a car payment. So this is a tough one. It's a tough one. So now we're going to move into the signs of abuse and kind of some of the things that we see, that you might see if you're talking with someone and if you've got concerns. So some sudden changes in behavior. Sometimes things kind of happen slowly, but it can be pretty quick, kind of more acute. And so if you're seeing some changes maybe in the person's behavior that you haven't noticed before, maybe some things that just don't seem quite right about the individual, these might be some things. A very interesting, I put bruising in unusual places. So I was talking about the research that they've been doing, and several years ago, it's been several years ago now, they did a bruising study, and one of the things that they realized was that I, for one, am they didn't realize this about me. I'm just letting you know I'm a klutz. And I get bruises all the time on my arms, on my legs, because I bump into stuff. And then like 3 days later, I'm like, where did that come from? I have no idea. Well, everybody's that way. People bump into things, they get bruises, they don't know where they got it. They just kind of go on about their life. Bruising in unusual places, on your head, on your face, on your neck, on the soles of your feet, just strange places. Those tended to be associated with an incident of abuse, and regardless of the person's cognition, they were able to recall that incident. So we're not talking about run-of-the-mill bumped into something, bruises. We're talking about bruises that really are going to be indicative that maybe something is not right, okay? Black eyes. I fell. I bumped into a door. Those are all pretty good generic excuses to cover why somebody might have a black eye. But they also might have been smacked, right? They may have been hit. They may have been shoved and run into a wall. Maybe they didn't bump into something. Are you able to access the person, right? Are you able to go to your friend's house and say, hey, I'd like to talk to Beverly today. Hey, I'd like to talk to Stan today. Well, Stan's not available. Beverly can't come to the door. Nope. You try to call, same thing. Nope, she can't come to the phone right now. Well, once, okay, but twice, third time, head scratcher for me. If I'm not being allowed access to see somebody, I'm going to have a problem with that. Why don't you want me to see them? What are you concerned that they might tell me? What might be going on that I'm concerned about? Also, if you can't talk to them on the phone, if the person, and these generally are going to be instances where there's a caregiver involved, okay, of some type. So if they're not allowing you to access the adult, that's going to be something that might generate further questions in your mind. But they've always got an excuse why the adult's not available, to come to the phone, to come to the door, to go out to lunch. So those would be things I would listen for. And all of these lists, they are by no means meant to be exhaustive. They're just examples of things that you might see and might give you pause to want to do a little more digging. So then, signs of neglect, kind of if you're seeing that, maybe if you've seen somebody and they kind of start to look maybe not as well kept, maybe they used to get their hair done all the time and now it's not, or maybe they used to always have their makeup and nails done and they don't anymore. And you're seeing that they're looking less and less put together. Maybe they're not eating. Maybe they're not getting enough to drink. If you're able to see the house, you may see unsanitary or unclean living conditions. Certainly a possibility. These things that you may or may not have. For some of these things, you may not be able to visually see them, right? You may not see that their medications are unfilled or that they've missed doctor's appointments. The assistive devices, this is an interesting thing. So I need my glasses to see. And I had to clean them when I got here because they were filthy. I could barely see through them. But I need them to see. And some people may need a hearing aid to hear. Maybe they need dentures. Maybe they have a walker or a cane. How easy would it be for somebody to get up and move around the house if they didn't have their walker next to them and they couldn't get up and get it because it was just out of their reach? How easy is it going to be for somebody to eat if they don't have access to their dentures? Or to be able to hear your conversation if they don't have their hearing aids? Or read what you're asking them to sign if they can't see it because they don't have their glasses. All of these are things that we kind of, on the surface, take for granted, but a couple levels down, maybe it could be a problem. I can't do very much without my glasses. I really need them. So if someone was asking me to sign something, I'd be like, where are my glasses? If they're asking a question and you can't hear them, that's going to make it difficult for you to be able to respond to the question. So I think that sometimes we don't think about those things as super important, but obviously they're super important. And this is going to be a big one. We're going to spend some time as we get into the rest of the presentation talking about scams and other types of financial exploitation. We're seeing it more and more. Scams and just general exploitation is really on the rise. Obviously, those statistics that I shared with you earlier shows just how much money is being lost year to year. So if you think about yourself and your own practices of how you keep your finances, you probably know what you do, whether you balance your checkbook every week, whether you go online to see what debit card transactions have been paid, whatever your process is, it's going to be individual to each of us. You all know what you do. So if you saw something and were like, wow, I didn't spend that $1,200 on that thing, you're going to call your bank. You're going to try to get that figured out. But if you don't know it's happening, or someone else has access to your account and they're doing those things, that's a problem. If someone is changing that information, maybe you have someone who's been helping you pay your bills and they take a little bit more control of that than they should. That might be something to be concerned about. And everything has context. I didn't come here today to make everybody super concerned about all of the relationships in their life. That was not my plan. And it certainly isn't my goal. But it is important to pay attention, because as I was going over this slide presentation with my coworkers to kind of get some feedback from them, and on one of the slides I say, if you're depressed, talk to someone. And they're like, that's the problem. Right? Like, you talk to someone, you get a trusted someone, and then the wheels can kind of fall off. So there is context for everything. You know your lives. I'm just asking you to pay attention to the signs that you're seeing in your life, right? So if you've got someone that you share time with and feel good about, great. I'm not asking you to suddenly be suspicious of everybody. I am asking you to keep an eye out, right? So unauthorized, unexplained credit charges, all of those things. Unpaid bills despite having funds. Sometimes calls come from city utilities. Sometimes bills come from the water department because they say, Mrs. So-and-so pays her bill every month, like clockwork. But for the last 3 months, it hasn't been paid. Well, that's a problem. Let's see if we can find out why that's happening. So people are watching. They may be behind the scenes. Yep.
I do have a comment that banks have some safety features built in.
They do. Banks have some safety features built in, she said.
I have two accounts. One is the one the money goes into, the other one's the money that the money goes out of.
Okay.
And I was going to have to pay for a roof. So I wrote a check from me to me for $10,000, and the bank put a 24-hour hold on it and double-checked the signatures.
Sure. Great.
I love it.
Absolutely. Not all banks do that. So that's great. Any safety features, and actually these days financial exploitation has been gaining a lot of visibility. We get a lot of calls from banks. Frontline tellers are doing a better job of asking questions. But it depends bank to bank. So that's great. I'm glad that your financial institution is doing that. Because it's not just banks. It's credit unions. It's places where people have their money. So it's a financial institution, right? So, all right. So here's the thing. It's viewed as a low-risk crime, and that person, they may have a nest egg or they may have some monthly income. But the amount stolen is relative, right? If $500,000 is your nest egg and someone takes $400,000 of it, or $450,000 of it, or $500,000 of it, there goes your nest egg, right? If you have $34,000 in your account and that's your nest egg, and someone takes $27,000 of it, that's a big chunk out of that nest egg. And where it really starts to get tricky is all of the things that knock that off. It's a domino effect. Often that money is not going to be, you're not going to get that money back. It's not going to be returned. The person has spent it. They've done away with it. It's in a cryptocurrency ATM somewhere, and you're not getting that money back. The money that you were going to use to pay for your medical bills, for a hospital stay, for long-term care, any of those things, it's gone. And the next thing that really can start to happen is depression, because it's that downward spiral. And so there's a bit of a chart that you can look back and say, if it weren't for this instance of that person being financially taken advantage of, their health over here wouldn't be what it is now, because it's just a decline. And That's why it's so important to hang on to it in the first place and to not let people get it. Because once it's taken, it's gone. Sometimes some of it may be returned. If they act quickly, that can happen, but often the money is just gone. It's even worse if that person is known to the person, related to the person, all of the things, because here you've now got someone in your life who just took all of your money and you know them. Maybe you raised them. Maybe it's your grandchild. Maybe it's somebody that you never thought would take advantage of you in this way, but the outcome is the same and the damage has been done, right? So those are the types: abuse, neglect, exploitation. Does anybody have any questions about those things that we've talked about? Yes.
Are you going to give us suggestions on how you choose somebody to manage your money?
I am not going to talk specifically about that.
Well, some of us are old enough to remember Wilbur Skaggs.
Okay.
He was an officer of a trust company who was robbing widows
Oh,
and lost his law license and went to prison, and that's fine, but they didn't get their money back.
yes.
And he was an employee of a trust company. So if you can't trust the trust company, who do you trust?
There are bad actors everywhere, unfortunately, right? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but there are. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to know how to report.
That's what we're moving on to. Any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, I want to give you not a sub story, but a happy story. My husband, sitting here with me, Forrest, was getting a phone call from someone that said he owed money. Well, he couldn't be. He was online, he was looking, and he was trying to figure out. And they said, no, you do owe the money. You're going to have to transfer the money to us. And he was getting very frustrated, which is not his personality. And so he went to Frontier Credit Union. And thank goodness they know him very well there. And he was talking on the phone as he goes in because he was going to get the money transferred. And several of the people that know Forrest said, what are you doing? I'm going to get rid of this man who is really bugging me on the phone with this money. He wants this money. And they took the phone away from him and shut the whole thing down.
Brilliant.
They did a wonderful job. I'm very pleased to announce that there are definitely local banks where you go that know you, that are there to help you in cases.
Wonderful. So she just said if you were able to hear that there was a situation, was everybody able to hear it? Okay, very good. So fantastic. I'm glad that they hung up, right? So we're going to talk a little bit with the rest of our time. We're going to talk about what to report, when to report, kind of what happens once a report is made and what that looks like, and then finish up with some scam information. So this is always the first question I get. When? The answer is whenever you have a concern about someone. You don't need to have seen something. You don't need to have some special knowledge. You need to have a concern that someone in your life is being abused, neglected, or exploited. You don't need to know. That's not our decision-making process. We just have a concern. So whenever you've got a concern, that's when you make a report. So I will tell you that while I have this information up on the board about where to make a report to, I also have magnets that have all that information, and I also have some bookmarks that have all that information. So please be sure to walk away with one of these as you leave today, because they are quick access, important numbers to call. So you don't need to write it all down is my point, because I'm going to move on to the next slide. So this is the next thing that people want to know about. What should you report? When you're calling to make a report, whether it's to Adult Protective Services, to the Department on Aging, to Health and Environment, to whomever you're making that report, the thing that is going to be the most helpful is for you to be as descriptive as possible in what you know about what you saw, because that will help the people looking at that information to move it on to the next phase to be able to do that. So whatever you saw, if you were able to access the person. Because if you weren't able to access the person, that's just as important as if you were able to see them, right? So if you saw them, what was their status? What was their state of mind? How did they seem to you? If Sally is always as cool as a cucumber and she was clearly in distress, that's important to note because that's unusual behavior for her. Context matters, but if it's different enough for you to be concerned, it's enough for you to mention, okay? If you saw that they had visible injuries, that's important, especially if they don't typically have injuries. If there's an alleged perpetrator, how was their state of mind? Were they angry? Did they not want you to talk to the person? Were they angry when you said, no, I really need to see them? And if they didn't give you access, did you threaten to call law enforcement? And, you don't want to put the person further at risk, but you also have to take into account that something's going on. So law enforcement is also an option. And some of this, again, you may or may not know. If you haven't been in the house recently, maybe you just saw Sally at the market and were able to talk to her somehow. She was at the market, and you were able to talk with her. You may or may not know what the state of the house is. A lot of houses, I've been in them. This is what they look like. Yeah? So if you know, report what you know, not what you think, what you've seen, what you were told. And the agencies that do those investigations, the Department for Children and Families, Adult Protective Services, they investigate in the community. Aging and Disability Services does those investigations in nursing facilities and other facilities that are licensed by them, and law enforcement. We have that criminal statute, so we showed that to you. How's my time? Okay. But each agency has different roles and responsibilities, okay? These agencies are social service agencies. Adult Protective Services is going to notify law enforcement. They're going to try to get services for that adult that is being affected by the abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and do what they can to remove them from that situation. Yes, sorry?
Long-term care ombudsman?
Yes, yep. Yes, there is. So the long-term care ombudsman is a great resource. It's for individuals that reside in those facilities. It's a resident-driven response, though. So whereas you could call and make a report about your neighbor and be concerned because you don't know what's going on and you want to find out more information, you can share that information rather to make that report. With the ombudsman, the resident has to request that the ombudsman take action. So it's a little bit of a different flow chart. So, yes.
How long, if you make a report about something, how long is the response time before somebody actually investigates your complaint? Also, how do you know when you make a report that there won't be reprisals against the individual that you're concerned about?
So her question is, how long until something is done with the investigation, and then also how do you know that there won't be reprisals? So information made to Adult Protective Services statutorily is confidential, so nobody is going to say that you reported. I promise I did lots of investigations, and they were like, my son reported this. I can't tell you that. You can know it in your heart as true as your bones, but I'm not going to tell you that. Right? Because that's not my role, and I can't statutorily. As far as the investigation part goes, 24 hours, 3 days, or 5 days are the time frames associated with that. So 24 hours based on the information, 3 days or 5 days are the time frames to make initial contact with the adult. And generally, the hard part is the not knowing what happens after that. Because once the report is made, they're not going to follow up with you and say, hey, we went out and saw so-and-so and this was the outcome. That's not, people get frustrated about that, but it doesn't work that way. Yeah.
You all have
So law enforcement, obviously that's the criminal investigation. There's going to be some different things that can happen there, but here we've got, for the prosecution part, these are some of the things that can happen there. For investigations into nursing facilities, they're going to look at a survey, compliance survey. Disciplinary action can be taken, termination. They have a registry that people can go on, but they also do prosecution as well. So adult protective services, they get by far the vast majority of the reports that are made, just because they are the social service agency and they deal with adults living in the community. And remember the show of hands, everybody lives in the community, right? A lot of folks are in the community. So they make there's two options for findings, and then they also have a registry that agencies can access with a release of information if they're like hiring, volunteer organizations, that sort of thing, if they're working with older adults. All right, moving on. We just have a little bit of time left, and I know everybody came. You came for the elder abuse, but you stayed for the scams. I get it. That's okay. We're going to talk a little bit about this. Those imposter scams. Here, I will tell you, I just had an opportunity to sit in on a scam forum on last week, maybe, and Publishers Clearinghouse, the vice president of their legal department, was the person giving the presentation, and he said, Publishers Clearinghouse, A, they don't do direct mailings anymore, they don't sell anything anymore, and this was very important, what you see on TV is what you get. They show up at your house, unannounced, bouquet of flowers, balloons, the prize patrol is how you get it. They do it in person. They're not calling you and saying, hey, you won some money, right? He did say they have some smaller prizes that may go out in the mail, but the vast majority of what they do, $10,000 and more, they're showing up at your house. So what does that tell us as the consumer? If someone on the social media app says, hey, it's Publishers Clearinghouse and you won something, or someone calls you and says, hey, you won something, it's not true. Hang up. You don't need to talk to them. They won't. Delete spam report. So if it's your grandkid, they're in trouble, help. The government, you're in trouble, right? Somebody's trying to get you to give them money. That's really what they're trying to do. So those are some pretty common scams. Phishing scams to try to trick you into giving information. Social Security, they'll not ask for it. Credit card information, again, all of these things, they're scams. Debt collector scams, natural disaster scams, you might see these less frequently than some of the other ones, but they're going to be tied to things like the wildfires and the floods and that sort of thing. Lesser known, but still out there, romance scams are on the rise. I'm here to tell you, those scams are right out there. I hear at least once a week about somebody who bought them a truck, and they are just waiting for them to come, right? Because they're going to marry them, and they're going to, right? All kind. I mean, just however you want to put it together. Those are out there. And then, of course, the online dating scams, catfishing, all that. Questions? Yes. You know, I wish I had done it. My supervisor just gave me one. She was like, I just got this, and she texted it to me, and I didn't get it on the slide. But no, delete and report, because the toll scam is a big one right now. Yep.
For youth, we have required reporters, school, teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody in the system for elder abuse that's required to report?
You know, I did not list. There's a whole slew of mandated reporters for adult elder abuse, and it is a lot. It may not be quite to the level of children. But I didn't bring that statute specifically. But yes, there are quite a lot of mandated reporters: law enforcement, social workers, doctors, people in medical fields, therapists. There are a lot of mandated reporters for adults. I didn't bring that particular statute with me though. So they are, but really, while they're, Yes, absolutely. And while there are mandatory reporters, we're all kind of reporters, aren't we? Right? Like, we care about the people in our communities, so we're all reporters. All right. So here are some things to do to prevent it, to try to, now you're going to be targeted. One of the things that I did not share statistically is the wealth transfer that's going to happen in the next 20 years or so. Trillions of dollars are being shifted between generationally over the next few years. So that is one that I did not put on here, but this is part of the reason why older adults are targeted. They also tend to have phones, right? Some of us still have landlines. Now, my husband would say, Bessie, it's not a landline, it's a VoIP because it goes over the internet. So it's an internet phone. But guess what? It's plugged into my wall and it rings. So I call it my landline. So you don't have to answer the number. Phones are a convenience for us, not for the people calling us. If they really want to talk to you, let them leave a message, which I do all the time. Yes. Yes. Turn your ringer off. So that'll get you through, but we'll also talk about that. There is a no-call list you can get on that won't get rid of all of them. It will diminish them, okay? But hang up if someone tells you you've won. Hang up if someone tells you you've won anything, because it's illegal to ask you to pay for money for something that they've told you you've won, and there's nothing, you don't need to pay taxes. Just hang up. Just hang up. Be like, goodbye. Hang up if there's an emergency, right? Even if you don't stay in touch with your family, hang up. Yes?
I've noticed in the last year or so a huge increase in people coming door to door trying to sell these things.
Oh, we're going to.
It used to happen for years.
Well,
Everywhere.
is it?
I had one yesterday.
Oh,
Trying
really?
to sell me fixing up my house.
Oh, so then you're going to come over here to our Public Protection Division, pick up some of this information here, make sure you get these numbers, but also take that number down and look at the things that they investigate. They do door-to-door sales, so definitely touch base with our Public Protection Division. So you can register your phone number on the Do Not Call registry. There is a link on the Attorney General's website where you can find that information. Again, it's not going to stop all of those calls, but it will slow them down a little bit. Don't open links to text messages. I'll tell you, I don't open anything. I trust no one. So even my brother texted me something the other day. I'm like, what'd you send me? Because I don't open stuff on my phone. And then he told me what it was, and I was like, okay, stop sending me stuff on my phone. So don't share any personal information in texts. Pig butchering, has everybody heard of pig butchering at this point? Okay, so it's a new thing where it's usually done with text messaging, and they'll say, oh, hey, hi, how are you? It's been a minute. How have you been? And they text you, and they pretend like they know you, and they kind of keep you going, and then they go for the ask because they want some money from you. Spam, just report it. I always say report. You know, if you check on your little 3 dots on your cell phone, up in the right-hand corner, generally, I have an Android. I know nothing about Apples. But at least on my Android, I can click on the right side, and it'll say report and block. Every single time. I don't even pretend like I'm interested in following up. Change your passwords. Don't click on pop-up links. If you are a computer person, if you are a tablet person, if you are a person who utilizes technology, do not click on pop-up links. Verify websites. Now my husband, he works in cybersecurity, and he said that this is, they're getting a little better at some of this, but generally you should still be able to hover over the website, and it will tell you if it is what it is. So if it says Microsoft Outlook or Outlook whatever, but you hover over it and it goes jbyzx27npqr.com, it's probably not an Outlook account, right? So you want to make sure it's got the security. That generally is something that you can pay attention to, and you're going to look for that. Don't open things that you don't know, And if you have something, the ic3.gov is a good spot to go to be able to report that. That's the FBI. You don't have to answer the door. I don't. I have literally, there's a curtain on my door, and I have literally stood on my side of the door and listened to somebody knock. And I just stand there and wait till they go away. Yes. Mm-hmm. Do you guys have Ring doorbells, or do you have some of those things, those technologies on your doors? Oh, the Internet of Things. So for mail also, if you're not quite sure, look up the number, not the one they gave you. So, and again, call the police. If they're coming to your house and maybe they've come by several times, just call the police. Yes, question.
Don't they have to have a license to operate in the city?
Yes, a peddler's license for sure. Roofing stuff you can check with the on the AG site. But yes, they should be having something. And you might even have city codes that are even more stringent than whatever the state has sometimes.
If they show me a license, I'm not gonna know if it's legitimate or not.
Fair. She said if they show her a license, she's not going to know if it's legitimate or not. All the more reason to just not answer the door, right? Word of mouth is a great way to find out about providers, right? Like, oh, hey, they did a great job on my roof, so I can recommend them confidently, and they didn't rip me off. So we're finishing up. It just happens to be I got so lucky that I got to come here and give a presentation to you all during Consumer Protection Week, right? Yeah. So we're going to watch a little bit of a quick video. Knowing what we learned last time. Nope, I feel confident. I'm feeling good about it. We're doing it. I'm running just a couple minutes over. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go.
Oh, it shows stuff too?
Oh. I felt so good about what was happening right there. And then it wasn't what I thought. So he's fixing it for me now.
Got a scan that we recently saw where a company got an elderly woman on the line and convinced her, that, made her scared of, the stock market and everything else and stuff, and convinced her that she needed to pull all her money out and put it in gold, and then they would hold the gold for her. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Can everybody see that okay?
Hi, I'm Andre Avery, United States Postal Inspector. It's National Consumer Protection Week, and this year's focus is on imposter scams. Here are the 5 most common ones to watch out for. Number 1, you receive bogus alerts about suspicious activity or unauthorized charges on your account. Number 2, phony notices come your way saying you're going to be charged to renew a subscription, often for a tech support service. Number 3, scammers try to trick you into paying for things like fake discounts, giveaways, or prizes. Number 4, bogus allegations are made implying you committed a crime. And number 5, someone claiming to be from the Postal Service contacts you regarding a fake delivery notification and asks for your financial information. Federal agencies will not press you for personal information, tell you to keep secrets, or demand instant payment. Scammers will ask for payments by gift card, prepaid debit card, cryptocurrency, gold bars, or by mailing cash. But agencies will never ask for instant payments by those methods. Ignore the messages or hang up.
So the Postal Service, the Postal Inspector does a lot of things to work for being aware of what's happening. And so pay attention to that. The USPIS, I've got it on the, I am so sorry I'm running over. I just have a couple of things. I talk too much. Okay, so protective factors. I know, there's been a lot of gloom and doom I've talked about today, but there are things that you can do. There's no promise that you won't become a victim of elder abuse. I wish it was that easy. There's nothing you can do that will totally prevent you from becoming a victim of elder abuse. I wish it was that easy. It's just not. But there are things that you can do to increase your protective factors that make you much more of a bother, right, to the person that would be trying to take advantage of you. So staying involved in your community, being a lifelong learner, right? Learning something, knowing something, continuing to gain information and knowledge is going to be really helpful. Staying active. Ask questions. Look, if somebody doesn't like the fact that you're asking a question about something, it's about them, not you, and you probably should walk away, right? If somebody's not comfortable with you questioning what's happening, that's a problem, right? So ask questions. Create a check-in system with a trusted friend. If you've got someone in your life and you call each other every day, great. You go on a walk every morning, great. And do those things, because those things will be, of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some things that you can do to keep yourself up and going. I've just listed, I forgot to take away a little bullet point. I've listed these resources here. They are by no means is it an exhaustive list, but sometimes if you go and look at those resources, they'll give you more resources. So with that, that was my last slide. Yay! Thank you. Yes.
I'm not in that far, but here's my question. Because I yelled at, I didn't yell at him, but I talked to him the other day. They need to watch to tell when I can't do this stuff anymore. That scares me beyond my children. My children. Because I might not know when I can't tell a bad email from a text message from whatever. And so that's what scares me.
So she's saying that it scares her that she may not be able to tell what's a good email, what's not a good email, or a text message or something.
I mean, because you're going to get older.
Lord willing, we are all going to get older. That's true. I'm a big fan of delete. If I'm just uncomfortable with it, I delete, because that if it's just delete. So, and to your point, I'm sorry, you were talking about the scam with the gold bars, and those are situations where it's very difficult to get that money back once the transaction has happened.
I would just say, ask a second opinion.
Yep.
Call somebody and say, is this legit? My mom almost got taken on a scam. She had an IT company call her and say, I'm calling to do your annual check on your computer.
Yep.
She had actually paid for a service.
Mm-hmm.
She thought it was them.
Yep.
They got on and they did some stuff and they asked her for her
Mm-hmm.
He was gonna give her a refund for what she paid before and set up a new account. So he was gonna transfer money into her account. So he transfers money into her account, he says, and then he says, oh my gosh, I put an extra 2 zeros on it. It was supposed to be like $100 and it was like $10,000, okay? He says, I need you to give me this money back, or I at least need $1,000 by tomorrow, or I will get fired. So she called me. He even sent her a snapshot of her bank account showing that money went in there. She calls me, thank goodness. And I said, Mom, this is not right. We call the bank, no, whatever. But everything looked legitimate, so.
They are becoming more and more complex. They absolutely are. Well, thank you. If you have other questions, I'll be here for the rest of the day. So please take a second on the break to look at the table, and thank you.
Thank you, Bessie, very much for all that information. We are going to take